afternoon. This is the closing of Patterns and Totes for Paper Ballet, which is three bodies of work. Each took about a year to make. 16 photographs that were completely constructed from paper costumes, paper sets, including the shadows. So take a look at the shadows closely. You'll notice it's the third character in this narrative, implied narrative. There isn't a there's a dialogue between a classically trained ballerina and a Martha Graham trained modern dancer. I thought it would be interesting to see the contrast between the two in terms of the lines that they would create with their bodies. So thank you once again for coming. So this body of work was created actually in 2015 and it's never been seen. Just got printed this year. It was a labor of love. I did this when my child was 3 and I had about an hour and a half each week to be able to work on it. So it did take me a while. There's 16 total. There's 4 sets of 4. So they're loosely based on, and it's almost an homage to, if you know the Bauhaus, Oscar Schlemmer was a teacher there, and he developed what's called the triadic ballet. And if you don't know it, look it up because it's fantastic. It speaks to everything that means the most to me: shape, form, color. These I did monochromatically because I wanted to have more of the tension between the dancers and the sets that they're placed in. So I have this body of work, but for the last 30 years I've presented myself as a fine art photographer. But I did my last show, I made a catalog, and then once again it was two-dimensional, and I thought, what am I doing? I really am desiring to do a three-dimensional object, and why am I limiting myself? So my husband and child and I went to Zion a couple of years ago, and as you know, if you've been to Zion, it's nothing but shapes and forms, light and shadow. And so when I went there, I said, I'm all yours, Zion, show me what my next project is. And I said, it was completely obvious. I mean, it hit me over the head. It's just get back to basics. So when we go in the back room, you'll see the body of work that was inspired by Zion is all white. It was also during this period that I was reading everything I could get my hands on, Barbara Hepworth and Ben Nicholson, 2 British artists during the 30s and 40s, and beyond. But this time period of Ben Nicholson in the 30s, just as the war was starting, just drew me to the shapes and the light, just on white. So it was really, it was interesting. People are, use the word whitewashing. Well, this isn't a whitewashing. This is a blank slate, a beginning for me to progress into a more three-dimensional medium. So about a year and a half ago, I had an open studio here at Keystone, and I had one of these paper ballets up, and it sold. And I was like, oh yeah, great, I still like this, but nobody's seen it. But I had all these other pieces up, and I thought, all of a sudden I started looking at them, and I saw that my visual language was still having a dialogue between the two of them. The shapes and forms that I've always kind of dealt with in my artwork were still reflected 10 years later. And I thought, what could I do to connect these two? Because I really did want to fill up this gallery, and I wanted to have a show of these 2 bodies of work, but I did not see the connection between the two until I walked in my studio one morning. I'm like, oh my God, what do you have with a ballet? There's no ballet without music, right? And being a rock and roller and in a couple bands, it was a natural progression for me to include musical instruments. So paper symphony was what I wanted to do, but I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to construct it, obviously of paper, but is it going to be freestanding? And then I hit on the idea of a silent symphony, that they could be molds of instruments pressed with paper pulp. So for another year, I spent, those of you who actually are Keystone artists here probably saw me blending with my Vitamix for a year. pressing them into molds and making these in birch, having them routed out. So I introduce you to a paper ballet with a silent symphony and the audience back here. I'd love to show you the audience. So please feel free.
So that's the symphony itself and the musicians, any other representatives?
Those are the ballerinas on stage with the symphony on either side. And here we are, the audience. Everybody take one and play with the art. Because it's really about the shadow. It's really about the shadow and not the body of work that I want to emphasize. So you have dance without movement. You have music without sound, and now you have an audience without a physical presence. If I had it in a museum, I was thinking it really should come out and then maybe move on its own so you could watch the shadows, but this is what I came up with. So I think it's kind of fun. I do love when people can interact with the pieces itself. So, does anybody have any questions about the process or the work?
I know I was really get the audience and love the way the shapes in the shadow. How did you come up with the shapes or not?
So the shapes came from, well, this one you can see I started here as a vision of Zion National Park. I should clarify, Zion National Park. It was a sunset, and I really, really loved how this shadow drops over here. So I constructed everything with a light. I did these in cardboard, because I'm not a woodworker. I hired a master woodworker to cut these out in birch. But the shapes and the instructions were mine. But as you can see, it's almost like a sunrise and a sunset.
Yeah.
So during this time, I was also doing a lot of research on monoliths and places like Ballet in Turkey and various monoliths around the world. They're all associated with sound as well. I don't know if you noticed that. Not the monoliths that stand, well, they think maybe even like Stonehenge, Newgrange. They're places when you go into the chamber. They're not canyon. Exactly. So it's a combination between sound and light, and that's what these are about. So this is loosely based on a lot of research I was doing. These were leftover pieces. There's a couple of things that are chance in here. This one and this one. This is all leftover pieces that were made from these four. It really floated my boat, and I thought I'd keep it in there. But there is elements of sound. You can see sound in this one, and this one, and this one, and as well as in here. So there's a lot of sound references in these pieces. I don't do a lot of triangles, and I wanted to really kind of force myself to do a triangle because they have such beautiful lines. So that's where a lot of these shapes were influenced. This one is, I can't remember, it just was discovered in Malta. And it's a huge 5-story, I wish I could remember the name, I'm forgetting it at the moment, but it's, you literally go into the lowest floor, and they think that this is about 20,000 years old. They just discovered it in the 90s. And if you start humming at the bottom, it gets louder and louder every chamber you go up. And that just is beautiful to me. That's where a lot of these were inspired by. So, did that answer your question?
Oh, and I love that it's global too.
And it's global. It's, a lot of people ask me, it's been interesting to do a show like this during the time period that we're living in, but it's also, I think, a moment of respite and joy that we can all kind of take a moment and look at line and shape and form and all relate to that on whatever political, social, cultural level we're on. So there was that. You know, the opening happened when Iran was bombed, so that was a kicker. But I think since the fires, I live in Altadena. Our house is fine. We had to get a new roof, but I think having a moment of solace once in a while is a needed thing, as much as, you know, the activism that we need to do. It helps us recharge our batteries. Looking at beauty, because as most of you in this room are artists, you know, one way or another. I know that you see beauty in everything, and this is my interpretation of it. Are there any other questions? Thank you. Thank you very much. And please be sure to take an exhibition catalog and poster. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. This one you didn't describe, so